Good morning. Barry Bryson here, thanking you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We talked last time a bit about Peter, about what happened to him between the end of the Gospels and the writing of 1st and 2nd Peter, which are written at the end of his life, which he makes clear. And we talked about the way he grew in confidence and in calm, and that it wasn't a straight line. But by the time he writes 1st and 2nd Peter, this is an old man. His demeanor is completely sanguine. This is a man at peace with what's about to happen to him, and safe in the arms of Jesus. I mean, we get that in his tone in 1st and 2nd Peter. Let's talk about the occasion of the writing of 1st and 2nd Peter. At the end of Paul's life, Paul ends up in Rome. He is in Rome when he writes 1st Peter, and almost certainly in Rome when he writes 2nd Peter. He mentions it at the end of 1st Peter. By the time he writes 1st and 2nd Peter, Paul is already dead. Paul has been executed. Both men were arrested and executed in the aftermath of the burning of Rome, which took place between July 18th and 23rd in the year AD 64 during the reign of Nero. And we know from the Roman historian Tacitus that everyone knew that Nero was the reason that the fire started, that Nero basically had some neighborhoods he wanted to clear out, and that the fire then got out of hand and spread. And that Nero needed someone to pin the blame on, and the easy target were the Christians. A lot of misinformation about Christians, a lot of whispering about Christians. The Romans at this point have understood they're not Jews, they're a different religion altogether and not protected by law. And so they were the easy target. So Peter and Paul are both arrested in the aftermath of this, and at the end of 1st Peter, Paul makes it clear that Mark is with him, and that Paul's guys are now his guys. And that tells me that Paul is unavailable, probably dead at this point, and that they're with Peter, working with Peter now. Peter will die not long after Paul does. That means that 1st and 2nd Peter were written fairly close to each other. They deal with what is going to happen to the church going forward. And there are two major issues the church is going to face, one external and one internal. The external problem is going to be persecution. It's just started. Christians are the enemy of the state. The persecution of the Roman Empire will not be unrelenting, but it will come in waves. Locally, it will be pretty bad much of the time. And so Christians everywhere are going to have to know how to handle persecution by the state. And that's what 1st Peter is about. 1st Peter is about that. This is what you're going to do between now and 313 in the Edict of Milan, whenever Christianity becomes legalized. This is what you're going to do for the next 250 years, while the Roman Empire tries to eradicate Christianity altogether. This is how you're going to survive. In fact, we know historically that new converts in the 2nd, 3rd century and the 1 and 200s were often immediately put in a newcomers class, a new Christians class, in which they studied the text of 1st Peter. It was almost used like Christian boot camp, to train new Christians on this. It's going to be hard. It's not easy to be a Christian. You could be arrested tomorrow and you're a babe in Christ. So this is the text that tells us how we're going to survive this. And a lot of the book of 1st Peter is about just that. This is what to do when you're interrogated. And those very words are used. When you are interrogated, do this. But a lot of it is how do we hold on to each other during the hardship. And that's just as important. When I was working in St. Clairsville, Ohio, we dealt with a major flood issue. We were the largest church in the area and of the Shady Side flood. And we administered or more than $300,000 of cash, not including the massive amounts of goods that came through our congregation and the Jacobsburg Church of Christ, to help the people during the Shadyside flood. And I have to tell you, you're a year doing it, and the people who lost their homes, of course, were more than a year building back. But we were a year ministering to these families directly, and it was hard. I mean, it's just as draining. So when you face a challenge day in, day out over a long period of time, it's hard to keep a church together. At the beginning, you're all hugging each other and loving on each other, but at some point fatigue sets in and it gets to be hard. And if you don't know how to do it, how to act, you're not going to survive. And so much of First Peter is about that too. Second Peter is about the other problem that the church is going to face going forward. And the church has always been persecuted somewhere. It's being persecuted right now somewhere around the world in a variety of ways. And some of the persecution is itself with a velvet glove, which makes it harder to detect that you're even being persecuted when you are. The other issue that we always deal with is false teaching from within. And that's what 2 Peter is about. And we'll talk more about that when we get to 2 Peter. But next time we're together, we're going to open up the text of 1 Peter. We're going to introduce it as a book and then get into the text. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.